Okay, so this is Joyce McFadden, my mother, on January 29th, 2014, on her 92nd birthday. And we're going to talk a little bit about her family history. So, what is your earliest memory?
Well, for one thing, I was always the outdoor girl. Had two sisters. The one that was older than I was 4 years older, and she was the indoor girl. She liked to read and sew and do inside things, and I just loved being outdoors. And so Mother decided that I should have a garden, and so I planted portulaca on a embankment in front of the house, and I really enjoyed that. I liked planting flowers, and my dad liked peonies and lilacs, and I forgot what the other one was. He always canna lilies, and so we always had a bunch of those around, and I would take care of them. And of course, I'd also be out in the barn most of the time because we had so many cats with little kittens all the time. We continually had a litter or two of kittens out there, and that was great fun for somebody who liked being outdoors and didn't want to be in the house anyway.
What do you remember about your dad?
He was a lot of fun. He had a temper. He'd get mad once in a while, and you were kind of afraid when he got mad because it didn't happen very often. But he really liked kids, and I think the thing that I remember about him is how much he loved to have kids and grandkids and everybody around him all the time. And he got along really well with a generation younger than he was. He'd go into town and he'd have all these buddies that would like to have him talk to them and just kid around with him.
Do you know much about his history of where his family came from, and how he met your mom and that
Yeah,
stuff?
well, he met my mom because she was a teacher in Valparaiso, Nebraska. And it was kind of a small town, probably not much bigger than Meade, which is 310 people. And Mom had a country school that she was teaching at the time, and my Aunt Bess went there, and that was Dad's sister. And so that's how she met my dad, and they became engaged not too long after that, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And before they came there, they came from Minnesota, from Iowa, Illinois. They stayed pretty much around the Midwest as far as I know.
Do you know, this was Meade, Nebraska?
Meade, Nebraska was where I grew up.
Where you grew up. So, do you know what brought him to Meade, Nebraska?
Oh, they moved there because my grandparents, there, right here, the Magnusons, my mother's folks, had settled there when they came from Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
And his brother worked for him for a while, Uncle Franz.
And is Uncle Franz on those pictures up there?
No, he's not in here, but he's
Okay.
a very interesting man. He always had a gold tooth. It fascinated me to death when we were kids. But he also liked to drink his coffee the Swedish way, which was to pour it in a saucer and then you go like that, and we would just, Dad would always look at us and we knew we were threatened with mayhem if we ever laughed out loud. But we'd try so hard to look serious, and Dad would look at us and kind of grin and try and tease us. But we got along. I liked those people. They were fine. He married a woman who had come to work for Grandma and Grandpa Magnusson, and she was from Sweden. And they got married, and then they moved to Fremont, which was only about 10 miles away, and we used to go see them. And their daughter and my oldest sister were very good friends, and she used to spend a lot of time there.
So now, how big was the farm that you were on? That you were raised on?
I don't really know. It wasn't a whole square mile, I know that, because Grandma and Grandpa lived at the one end of the mile and we lived at the other end.
Oh, okay. Is
So
that a farm still in the
There's probably
family?
about 4 or 5 farms in the square mile.
Uh-huh. Is that farm still in the family?
No, it isn't. Both houses burned at different times,
Really?
and
Did your house burn while you were living there?
no, thank heaven. There were some people. It got to be quite popular for people from Omaha to come down and rent houses that were vacant for farms, that were being farmed by somebody else. And so they had some young boys that moved in and they got to horsing around and there was something burning. And it ended up being the house.
So you guys still own the property, or your family? Oh, you didn't own the property anymore?
No.
Yeah.
And Grandma and Grandpa were both dead. And Uncle David, right there, had owned the property.
Okay, so that's your mom and dad. What was the other picture you showed me after that?
Oh, this is Grandma Magnuson, my mom's mother,
Right.
and Grandpa Magnuson.
Do you have pictures of your dad's parents?
Yeah. My dad, Horace Rand, and his wife, Cora.
So that's
Cora Adele Peach, her name was.
So that's your grandfather?
This would have been my grandfather. I never knew him because he died before I was born.
Uh-huh. How old were you when your father died?
Oh, well, you met him. You
I
don't
did?
remember it. You were very little.
I didn't know.
In fact, I was pregnant with Valerie at the time. And he had a heart attack, and we knew he was not going to live much longer.
Oh, is that right?
He'd had a lot of trouble with his heart because he did love to eat.
Red potatoes and meat too, probably a lot of it.
Well,
Or
yes,
potatoes.
and then besides, when they moved to Colorado, which was when I left high school, they had what they called a wheat ranch, and there was a certain time of the year when you would have to plant the wheat, and then the time it was harvested, and rest of the year the farmers had practically nothing to do except mend fences and do little things. And then they worked so hard during harvest time, getting it all out in time, that it was really hard on their hearts because they were so.
So yeah, because they had to work so hard for a very short amount, or for
Yeah,
a period
they
of
had to
time,
work
and
really
then
hard.
nothing to do. So there's
Yeah, it was very hard on their hearts.
What did you grow on the farm?
Well, when we were in Nebraska, it was corn and wheat and oats and potatoes.
And
Lots of potatoes.
did that pretty much support the farm? What you grew and sold?
Yeah,
supported the farm?
yeah, that's for sure.
And then your parents just decided that they didn't want to do farming after the kids were up and after the kids were up.
No,
and
after the kids were grown, after we were grown, his best friend from childhood, or as a young man, I should say, was Bob Cunningham, Sr. And he had bought a farm a wheat farm in Colorado, and his son came because then Bob Sr. died, and then Bob Jr. came out, and he tried to talk my dad into buying it because he said he just didn't want to let everything go. He wanted to sort of keep it around. And so Dad and Mother finally decided they would move out to Colorado and just grow wheat. And it was a lot of different activities for them because Mother had always been, her whole social life had been in the church. She was Baptist.
Right.
and went out there, and the people there were more into playing poker. So she had a bit of a change in her life.
How long were they in Colorado?
Oh, until Dad died. Let's see, that was 17 till you were about 2, I think.
So 58.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, do you remember your grandparents very much?
I remember Grandma Magnuson and Grandpa Magnuson very well.
Uh-huh.
And
And what were they like?
she was very severe.
Like, kind of like your mom?
I think she was a little mean, actually.
Yeah, which one? Your grandmother or your mom? Or your
My
mom?
grandmother, my
Your grandmother.
grandfather was just, she married him because he wasn't a bit like her dad, who is, the guy up there at the top. That was
That's her dad?
Great Grandpa Larson. I remember him. He was alive, and I think he died in our house.
Oh, is that
And I
right?
was about 6 years old or so, but we had made good friends. I would sit on his lap, and he would try and teach me a few Swedish words, and
Mm-hmm.
then he would,
How old were
next time
you?
I would be on his lap, he would try and confuse me and see how much I could catch him on, when he used the wrong word.
Uh-huh.
He said, "A little boigan," which meant, "Are you a little bird?" And then I would say, "No, no, no." Flika! And I just liked him, and everybody else thought he was a mean old guy.
How old were you during this time?
Oh, I was about 5 or 6 when he died, I think. And, he lived with us for several years because Grandmother Magnuson had developed cancer, and they knew she wasn't going to live much longer, and she certainly couldn't take care of her.
Yeah.
Contrary old father, he had very definite ideas. And during World War I, he would go downtown Meade and lecture people about how the Americans were treating the Germans so badly, because the Germans and the Swedish were sort of like cousins in a way. And you just couldn't talk him out of it. And he always had his Bible with him, which he couldn't read because he was blind. But anyway, I guess he carried it for effect. They were going to deport him, and then they realized that he was very ill, and I think he was about 90-something when he died.
Oh, well.
He was quite a character, but I liked him. We were good friends. I cried, and everybody was so surprised because the rest of the family didn't have very good opinion of him. And that was his wife up there. And I don't remember her name because I never knew her. She was gone long before.
Uh-huh. So that was, and what was his name again?
That was Grandpa Larson. What was his first name? I don't remember his first name because it was just Grandpa to me.
Well, maybe it'll come to you as we're talking about.
Yeah.
So who are the next two on the top? On the top right.
On the top right,
Yeah.
that's Great Grandpa Rand and his wife, who is the Dutch or the German, depending upon who you're talking to, woman in our family. You said you had heard that we had, I guess it was, I got a letter from Joan the other day, my niece, and she said she had heard that there was a Dutch woman in the family somewhere. And I had heard she was German, so that's her, whatever she is. But you could almost tell.
So, but did you ever meet them?
Beg pardon?
Did you ever meet them?
Oh no, they were gone long before I came along.
And were they in Meade too?
No, they were, I think, in Illinois.
In Illinois. And do you remember what their names were?
Let's see, No, I don't.
It's
I
okay.
don't think I ever knew it.
And so those were the Rands. Those were your great grandparents.
This on this side are all the Rand side of the
Okay,
family.
so next couple down.
That is Grandpa Pete, and who was Scottish.
So
and she was Grandma Loban, great Grandma Loban.
and these are on your father's side, your dad's side.
Yes, and she was also quite a little tyrant. She was about 4'11" and just ran everybody ragged. And I guess when Grandma Rand, who is down here, my dad's mother, when she died, she made a specific request that my dad make a home for Aunt Bess with him because she didn't want Grandmother Pete to raise Aunt Bessie because she was too controlling. And my mother always thought that that was the reason she lost her first baby, or second baby, because Myrtle was already there. 2 years younger than Myrtle. But she had a miscarriage, and she figured it was because Grandmother Pete made her work so hard. But I don't know, that's probably it.
Right.
A bit
So
of her imagination, because I think they generally figure that the more you do, the better chances your baby has of surviving.
yeah. And then what about down there, third row down, just that one?
That's Grandpa Rand and Grandmother Rand, who was Grandmother Pete Rand. Cora, she was a lovely lady, I knew her.
And do you remember his name? His first name?
Horace.
Horace. Horace Rand.
H-O-R-A-C-E.
And where were they? Where?
They were in, well, when I knew them, they were in DeKalb, or in Minnesota, St. Paul.
St. Paul.
Yes. I didn't know him. He died, I think, about 2 days after I was born or something. But Grandmother Rand was a really nice lady. She was fun and she had a lot of jokes and she was so pleasant to be around. And of course we didn't see them too much because you didn't travel much at that time because of the Depression.
Yeah.
And you just didn't go on long trips if you didn't have to.
So, and then down below, those two pictures down below.
And this is Aunt Hazel, and this is my dad as a little boy.
So brother and sister.
Yeah,
So,
and this is Aunt Hazel again, and then this is Aunt Bess, who was much younger than my dad.
where in the picture on the left, you mean? That's it.
This is Aunt Hazel.
Oh, up.
That's Aunt Bess right down here.
Oh, okay. The next picture up. Right
Big
there
pardon?
with four of them. The next picture up.
Oh, that is Grandmother Rand as she was older. That's Grandma Pete. And that's my older sister Myrtle. And my dad on the far left.
Okay.
Did
Now
he have
the
his bow
one.
tie on? Yes, he had his bow tie on. He always wore a bow tie.
Oh, is that right? So that's Aunt Bess down there on the.
In the younger one.
And I remember her. And then who's this? The other one? Is that Myrtle?
Aunt Hazel.
Oh, Aunt
She
Hazel.
was born with TB of the bone, I think it was. And she had her leg amputated when she was quite young. But during World War I, she went all the way to Washington, D.C. to work to help the war effort. She was a very strong-minded lady. And I guess everybody really liked her. She had a boyfriend and he really wanted to marry her, but she wouldn't marry him because she was not healthy. And then I guess Aunt Bess remembered one time going into her Aunt Hazel's bedroom, and Aunt Hazel said, "You know, I've got a terrible headache. Would you run down and get me some aspirin?" And she did, and she came back, and Aunt Hazel was dead.
Wow.
That was kind of a sad thing because I like pictures of her. She was always dressed to the nines or doing something silly. Like during World War one of them had a cat and one of them had an enema tube, and they were all dressed up like World War One nurses, and they were giving this cat an enema. And she was always doing something silly, or she'd have a big bowl of popcorn about this big, because popcorn is a big thing in the Rand family. They always had lots of popcorn around that they made themselves.
So who's this big picture here of multiple people down there?
Oh, yes, this is my mother's family. And this is
Now, is this the Magnusons?
the Magnusons, yes. That's her mother and her father with Uncle Raymond in the middle.
Oh, I see, right there. And then who's that on the
And
outside?
this is my mother. And next to her is Uncle David.
Well, on the bottom row. Why don't we start with the bottom row?
Oh, yes, Aunt Delma's there.
Aunt Delma. So she's your mom's sister?
Yes.
Right.
And she's married to Don Lowell.
And then that's your mom. And then who's the little boy again?
This little boy down here is Raymond. He was the youngest kid of the family.
Of who was his mother?
Grandma Magnuson.
Oh, okay.
She's mother of all these kids.
Oh, so he is your mom's little brother, basically.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that is Edna on the far left.
Okay, and so those are your mom. That's your aunt, basically, right?
Yes. She married Guy Shields, who is not in the picture either.
So who's the woman above her?
And that is Aunt Ethel Olson.
Mm-hmm.
She married a Swede.
Okay.
And
the boy in the right in the middle.
In the middle, very middle, that's Uncle Dave.
Okay. So how many siblings did your mom have?
8.
8. Wow. And these are all of them right here.
She was next to the oldest.
Mm-hmm.
And the oldest one is the one in the middle on top. That was Uncle Aleph. And right behind Mother is Aunt Mamie in the dark brown hair. And on the other side, I got that kind of screwed up. I should have.
So next to the little boy, the woman next to the boy, who is that?
Which boy?
The boy right in the middle, the one we were just on, the little boy, and then right to our right.
Okay. Then behind my mother is Aunt Mamie.
Right.
And then Uncle Aleph Magnuson.
Uh-huh.
Mamie Wallen, she was the one who was married to the fellow. Elmer Wallen died when he came out to visit us when we were on Laverna. He didn't die in our house, but
right.
I mean, he died while he was visiting my mother.
Mm-hmm.
And
was he the one that
ended up that he had $3 million, and she was so mad at him because they had worked so hard on their farm. He just worked all the time. They never went any
And he
place.
never told her he had money. Can you imagine that?
Told her she thought they were just poor as church mice.
Did you see your mom's family much when you were growing up?
Oh yeah, we had to, as long as Grandmother Magnuson was alive, and I forgot, I think I was about 12 when she died.
Mm-hmm. And you said you remember her and your grandfather?
Yes, my grandfather I really liked. You can just tell by his face. He's a very kind, loving man. And she was very serious and very, this is the way things are. About 4 years old, and I was staying with her. She was babysitting me, and she was making chocolate cake. And I asked her if I could lick the pan and have all the frosting. And she went over that pan with a rubber scraper over and over and over again. There wasn't a darn thing left in that pan, and I was so mad at her. And I never forgave her for it. That's a crazy thing, but I always remember that. That's my one strongest memory of Grandma Magnuson. And once I saw she and my mother in the house, and they were crying together, and I imagine it was probably, I thought maybe mother had done something wrong and mother and grandmother was scolding her, but I think what it was she was telling her about her latest diagnosis from her doctor, knowing what happened, and she would become delirious at times, and then she would come up, and the next thing you know, she'd be out in the kitchen working. She was a very determined Swedish lady. I never did tell you about Uncle Elmer. He's the last fellow on the right.
The last fellow on the right in the big picture?
No, right down here. Yeah, the picture with all the people.
Right, the one with his hair slicked back?
Yeah. And he married the minister's wife at the Baptist church, Aunt Louise, and she was a lovely lady. She was from the South. She used to love sunflowers, and sunflowers, the bane of all the farmers' existence in Nebraska. And they used to just think it was terrible because she was always digging up those sunflowers and planting them in her yard. You know, we like sunflowers, but in Nebraska it was just considered you were no farmer at all if you had sunflowers in your field, and that was all there was to it.
So what about Uncle Elmer was?
He was a determined kind of a guy. They all had pretty strong personalities, but I had a friend well, not really his friend particularly, a guy who worked for Uncle Elmer who thought that he was very dictatorial. But I thought he was very nice. I liked him. We got along, and certainly I got along with his wife. They didn't have any children. She had been a singer, and something happened to her. She had to have some surgery on her throat, and the doctor goofed, and she just was hoarse and couldn't sing after that. It was really sad because we all liked her. She was a really nice woman.
Is she up there? Is she up there?
No, she's not, because he wasn't old enough to be married yet.
So did your family all have, did you get together during the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas?
Oh my goodness, almost every Sunday as long as my grandmother was alive.
So was it just your mom's side of the family, or did your dad's side and your mom's side both come to?
No, just my mother's side. My mother's side, because they came. They went up to, mother and dad went up to St. Paul after they were married. Because, well, another thing I have against Grandma Magnuson was the fact that my mother turned up pregnant about after all the invitations for her wedding were out, and she had made her wedding dress by hand, done all this work, and they were so ashamed, and she was going to punish her. And so they canceled the wedding.
This is your mom and your dad's wedding?
Yeah, and took her to a justice of the peace or something, I don't know what, or married from someplace where mother didn't even know anybody. But of course everybody knew what had happened because the invitations for the wedding had already gone out.
Yeah.
It was just the very last minute, but it was such a terrible thing for Grandmother Magnuson because she had her rules, by gosh. You better follow them. I thought it was mean, just plain mean. She just wanted to humiliate them as much as possible. So they took off and went up to St. Paul and lived near, I guess it was Cedar, Minnesota at that time. And stayed with Dad's folks for a while. And then I guess Mom got lots of her family, or maybe she found out then early on that her mother was not well. And so they came back there and got a farm and settled down. and lived there until I was
High school.
17 years old. And that was about the time they got this place in Colorado and moved out there and
So
did
where-
very well out in Colorado, actually, financially.
And so where did you go at that point?
Well, I was going to, let's see, I'd already finished my first year of college at University of Nebraska. And the year after that, I stayed a lot of it with Aunt Mamie over here on the far right on the top. Because they didn't have any children either, but they were all very good to me.